TheLandofIsrael.com and Israel National TV present Ari Abramowitz and Jeremy Gimpel. Live from the heart of Israel, it's Tuesday Night Live in Jerusalem.
Shalom and welcome back to Tuesday Night Live in Jerusalem. It's a pleasure to be here. Wonderful to have you all here with us. Wonderful to have all of the people at home watching us. On our journey throughout Jewish history, we had a lot of choices. There are a lot of historians out there, a lot of rabbis out there that know their Tanakh, but we've chosen such a unique individual. In fact, he's so young. I've never met anyone else like him in my entire life, and over the past month or so, I've actually become quite close friends with him. He is what I believe to be one of the most innovative and dynamic Jewish educators alive today. He's a scholar. He's a world-renowned lecturer on Jewish history, on Tanakh, on Jewish philosophy, which of course, all of those are relatively intertwined, and somehow he ties them all together in an amazing way that the information is absorbed, it's entertaining, it's inspiring, and it is my pleasure to introduce you to David Solomon. Tell me, the heck with them, why should we be learning Jewish history?
Everybody in the world, every human being, strives for meaning. And without meaning, our coming into the world and our attempt to realize and strive for purpose and to fulfill our potential would be a void exercise. And meaning starts with an understanding of who we are, our identity. And it's something that you said in the introduction to this program. You were talking about people who are born Jews, but it's almost like being part of a cultural club. Their existence starts with now, but when people start to open up and realize that, in fact, Jeremy, our Jewish identity is a massive ocean upon which we just sit, a mountain really. I mean, an ocean doesn't have a summit, does it? No. A mountain has a summit.
A very large wave.
Although perhaps the metaphor is more a boat on an ocean. And if you're not aware of where you came from, you're in the boat, but you don't realize you're on an ocean. And you certainly have no idea where the boat is going. Jewish history really, really begins with the thought of God that, you see, even for an infinite being like God, creating a universe that is finite and yet can contain an understanding of the infinite God that created it does require some thought. It's not an easy thing to do. Don't do it at home. When we realize that the Jewish people exist as that very part of God's plan to be revealed inside this universe, then we realize that we are much more than just a series of generations that hands down the recipe for gefilte fish. We are part and parcel of the very fabric of a universe that is striving to reveal the oneness of God. And therefore, we owe it to humanity to understand who we are. And that purpose has been revealed in the world now for nearly 4,000 years and became utterly self-evident since Sinai. That's something like almost 3,500 years ago. And since then, it's really been up to us to set up a society in the land of Israel that can radiate out to the nations to bring not just us, but the whole of humanity to a higher level. Jewish history is all that and much more.
Well, so Jewish history, it seems that it's an ocean, vast. What should we learn from Jewish history? What should we take from it? What part? What should we do?
Well, that's an excellent question. Jewish history is not only phenomenal, and we have the most amazing history of any people on the planet. And as you said, we have a commandment to learn it. Zechor Yomot Olam. Deuteronomy chapter 32, remember the days of the world. We have a Torah commandment to learn it. And yet, how do we get our head around it? How do we encapsulate that phenomenal history? So there are ways of getting a framework around it. If I had a whiteboard...
Did you see? That's what Tuesday Night Live in
That's
Jerusalem
what
is
happens.
all about.
Miracles happen. Suddenly I've got a whiteboard, and maybe I've got a marker.
All right, let's do it.
With your permission, Jeremy,
of course.
and with your permission, I'll just do something that very, very simple, just to give a framework of what we're talking about. I have to hold the marker in one hand.
It's all of Jewish history.
Yeah, there is a way of learning Jewish history. In fact, what I'd really like to do is use this room, but since the people who are not here won't be able to see the room I'm talking about, and since I don't want to twist people's necks by turning around the room, I'll use the whiteboard, but I'll draw the room. All right? This is the room we're in. And you can do this with any room, amazingly, because most rooms have 4 walls. There's you sitting there, right? And there's my chair, and I'm standing here.
David, you are an artist.
I know, and I'm also wasting a lot of time. Look, and there's lots of people. Now, if we, what people need to realize is that a framework not only gives us a way of encapsulating the details of Jewish history, but it also provides a notion of scale. Because sometimes people are not sure. I ask a lot of students, when did King David live? Did he live 100 years ago? Did he live 200, 500, 1,000? When did he live? And similarly, with all the events and personalities that have contributed to this ongoing process of Jewish history, we need a scale, we need a framework. Each of these walls can stand for 1,000 years. The most important framework that we can understand by that is that Abraham, the father of the Jewish people, is around about here. Here is Abraham. He makes a covenant with God. That covenant implies that his descendants will be around at the end of history. They will survive for a purpose. That covenant is built upon the idea of the revelation of the oneness of God in the world. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, we go down into Egypt for a galut, for an exile. We come out of Egypt. We're brought out of Egypt by God. This is Jewish history, the whole of Jewish history in 1 minute, by the way. We're brought out of and we stand before Mount Sinai, and we're given the Torah. And the Torah lays out an entire ethical, moral, and spiritual program for the whole of the rest of history, founded upon the covenantal idea that we are going to be given a land in which to create the ideal society. That land is promised to the forefathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and that land is founded upon social justice. We then move into the land. This is the period of the settlement of the land. This is the book of Judges. Finally, we get King David. There's a lot of more history. I'm giving absolute headlines. This here is the first temple period. This is the rise of the prophets. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, but also Amos, Hosea, the great transformative prophets of Israel who bring the idea of the universal God, the one God in the world who demands ethics, who demands justice. This is a revolution in the world, but eventually, of course, it wasn't enough. We didn't listen, and the temple built by King Solomon and dedicated to God is destroyed. Second temple period. Eventually, that second temple, very complex period, but here's Alexander the Great. By the way, here's Buddha. By the time Buddha comes along, we've already destroyed the first temple. Confucius, Zoroaster, Socrates, they're all here. Most of the world is still worshipping and eating cockroaches, and we're deep into the second temple. Here's Alexander the Great. That's a massive clash of cultures, but eventually the Romans come in, and the second temple is, no, there's no smoke because sacrifices had stopped. It's destroyed. Shortly after the massive Bar Kokhba rebellion, Beitar, and that's the end of any independent sovereign commonwealth, Jewish commonwealth in the land of Israel, until here. But there's much more. Every 500 years we pass through a major phase. So for example, from King David, first temple period, approximately 500 years. Second temple, 500 years. Then you've got a 500-year period here called the Talmudic, where we develop the whole concept of the oral Torah based upon the foundational principle of the dignity of the human being. Then we move into the Gaonic period, the rise of the Jewish community and what our purpose and direction is in the world. There's no center of the Jewish world here, and this is the period of the Rishonim, where the great pillars and beacons of the Jewish world, which once again unfold our destiny, those Rishonim are unified into a complete synthesis. By the way, the 700 year, and people who live in America and feel safe as Jews in America should remember that the 700-year community of Spain came crashing down around here at the end of the period of the Rishonim, and the Rif, the Rosh, the Rambam, the Ran, all these great beacons and pillars of light that we know of, these are synthesized into a universally accepted document called the Shulchan Aruch here. But once again, we are starting to see the revival of the spiritual community of the land of Israel. We are constantly yearning to come back. And this last period, which just finished recently, is the period of the Acharonim. And that's a framework. There's only 6 really periods of 500 years each. And if we understand the major spiritual project of each of those, we can understand how all the details fit in.
The entire Jewish history in 3.5 minutes. Thank you, David.
What we need to realize is that there is a continuous narrative. We did not just pop up. I mean, I know that there was a great link made recently by one of the world leaders that seemed to say that the land of Israel is justified because there was a tremendous, atrocious event called the Holocaust. But this narrative is continuous. It is unbroken. It is a constant record of striving to build this society, not just for us, but for the world in the land of Israel. We did not wait till 1948 to come back. Every single moment that there was the possibility that we might be able to come back, we came back. And Jewish history is full of those episodes.
Wow. So I guess the question, I mean, Abraham to David, Rishonim, Achronim, like so massive, so crazy. Why? Why do we need all of the room? Couldn't we have had 3 walls, a triangle, maybe just like a little circle? Why such a massive history? What is it here to teach us?
Well, the first answer that comes to mind is really that we have to keep trying doing this until we get it right. Remember that the Solomonic period, the period of Shlomo HaMelech, King David's son, who built the temple in Jerusalem, dedicated to God, was meant to be an eternal building, that was a messianic period. But each stage that we almost get it right, there's something about the way in which our destiny unfolds that we have not yet understood. Those who study Jewish history deeply know that despite all the atrocities that we've been through, despite all the enemies that we've had, despite b'chol dor vador omdim aleinu l'chalotenu, that is in every single generation, there are those who try to destroy the Jewish people. The real reason why this is an ongoing process is because there are still things inside us that we need to fix.
Wow. So what then, I mean, with your background in Tanakh, in Jewish history, Jewish philosophy, because you really have the whole context, what would your message be to all of the viewers around the world, to the people here in the audience, if you had 2 minutes to encapsulate David Solomon's message to the world? What would it be?
The most important thing I think that people need to realize today about the Jewish people is that we are not a religion. We have a unique relationship with God. We have a Torah, we are a people, and we have a land. And I'll say this, I have no idea where the camera is, but the time for the Jewish people to live in the land of Israel is now. If you learn anything from Jewish history, you will know that Jewish communities outside the land of Israel have a past, they have a present, but they have no future.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Wonderful. David Solomon, everyone. Thank you very much, David.
Is it just me, or does having an English accent make you sound like you know what you're talking about no matter what you're saying? It's like the opposite of what my Texan accent does for me. You know, Rabbi Riskin, I remember Jeremy and I were sitting in his office and he told us a story like only he can about this Muslim terrorist that he met in Bethlehem. And this terrorist was in an Israeli prison. He was arrested. And he said over time, he started coming to terms with the fact that there was an Israel. It was a reality on the ground. And he said he was becoming more moderate. And one day he was in the prison yard and he saw his Jewish guard eating a sandwich made with bread, and it was Passover. And he asked his guard, "Why are you eating bread on Passover? Don't Jews not eat bread? Isn't that against the law?" And the guard said, "Oh, please, that was thousands of years ago. That has nothing to do with me today." And he said that right there and then, he knew that Israel could be defeated because of people, as we've mentioned tonight, that have no past, have no future. And what we need to do is do exactly that. Connect to the past, connect to the source. Not just to Moses or to Abraham, but to Adam, to the first man, to the creation of the world, to the very first verse of the Torah. You know, Torah starts, Bereshit bara Elokim. In the beginning, God created the entire world. And Rashi says, why does it start with that? Why not with the first commandment? If it's about commandments, let's start with that. And he answers by saying that in the end of times, when the nations of the world come against you, at any point when the nations come against you and say, the land does not belong to you, you are to respond and say, God created the entire world, and he could give the land of Israel to whomever he pleases. That is not only our defense for this land, but that is our purpose for being here. Shalom. Thank you for coming.
Alléluia, Bekocho, Alléluia. Berkiauzo, Alléluia, בגבורותיו, Alléluia, כרוב גודלו, Alléluia, בתקע שופר, Alléluia, בצלצל שמה, Alléluia, בקודשו, Alléluia, berkiauzo, Alléluia, בגבורותיו. Come on, Alléluia, בצלצלי שמה, Alléluia, בצלצלי תרועה, כל הנשמה תהלליה, Alléluia. כל הנשמה תהלליה, Alléluia. Alléluia את השם, כל גויים, Alléluia, כל אהובים כי גמר עלינו חסדו ואמת השם, לעולם Alléluia, לעולם Alléluia, לעולם Alléluia. כאן Alléluia, בצלצלי שמה, Alléluia, בצלצלי תרועה, כל הנשמה תהלל, Alléluia.